Leaving the little station of Vézenet, we come upon two roads. One, to the left, macadamized and kept in perfect repair, leads to the village, of which there are glimpses here and there through the trees. The other, newly laid out, and just covered with gravel, leads through the woods. Along the latter, which before the lapse of 5 years will be a busy street, are built a few houses, hideous in design, and at some distance apart, rural summer retreats of city merchants, but unoccupied during the winter. It was at the junction of these two roads that Prosper stopped the hack. The driver had gained his 100 francs. The horses were completely worn out, but they had accomplished all that was expected of them. M. Vergeret could distinguish the lamps of a hack similar to the one he occupied, about 50 yards ahead of him. M. Vergeret jumped out, and, handing the driver a banknote, said, "Here is what I promised you. Go to the first tavern you find on the right-hand side of the road as you enter the village. If we do not meet you there in an hour, you are at liberty to return to Paris." The driver was overwhelming in his thanks, but neither Prosper nor his friend heard them. They had already started up the new road. The weather, which had been inclement when they set out, was now fearful. The rain fell in torrents, and a furious wind howled dismally through the dense woods. The intense darkness was rendered more dreary by the occasional glimmer of the lamps at the distant station, which seemed about to be extinguished by every new gust of wind. M. Vergeret and Prosper had been running along the muddy road for about 5 minutes, when suddenly the latter stopped and said, "This is Raoul's house." Before the gate of an isolated house stood the hack which M. Vergeret had followed. Reclining on his seat, wrapped in a thick cloak, was the driver, who, in spite of the pouring rain, was already asleep, evidently waiting for the person whom he had brought to this house a few minutes ago. M. Vergeret pulled his cloak, and said, in a low voice, "Wake up, my good man." The driver started, and, mechanically gathering his reins, yawned out. "I am ready, come on." But when, by the light of the carriage lamps, he saw 2 men in this lonely spot, he imagined that they wanted his purse, and perhaps his life. "I am engaged," he cried out, as he cracked his whip in the air. "I am waiting here for someone." "I know that, you fool," replied M. Vergeret, "and only wish to ask you a question, which you can gain 5 francs by answering. Did you not bring a middle-aged lady here?" This question, this promise of 5 francs, instead of reassuring the coachman, increased his alarm. "I have already told you I am waiting for someone," he said, "and, if you don't go away and leave me alone, I will call for help." M. Vergeret drew back quickly. "Come away," he whispered to Prosper, "the cur will do as he says, and, alarm once given, farewell to our projects. We must find some other entrance than by this gate." They then went along the wall surrounding the garden, in search of a place where it was possible to climb up. This was difficult to discover, the wall being 12 feet high, and the night very dark. Fortunately, M. Vergeret was very agile, and, having decided upon the spot to be scaled, he drew back a few feet, and making a sudden spring, seized one of the projecting stones above him, and, drawing himself up by aid of his hands and feet, soon found himself on top of the wall. It was now Prosper's turn to climb up, but, though much younger than his companion, he had not his agility and strength, and would never have succeeded if M. Vergeret had not pulled him up, and then helped him down on the other side. Once in the garden, M. Vergeret looked about him to study the situation. The house occupied by M. de Lagers was built in the middle of an immense garden. It was narrow, 2 stories high, and with garrets. Only one window, in the second story, was lighted. "As you have often been here," said M. Vergeret, you must know all about the arrangement of the house. What room is that where we see the light? That is Raoul's bedchamber. Very good. What rooms are on the first floor? The kitchen, pantry, billiard room, and dining room. And on the floor above? 2 drawing rooms separated by folding doors, and a library. Where do the servants sleep? Raoul has none at present. He is waited on by a man and his wife, who live at Vézenet. They come in the morning, and leave after dinner. M. Vergeret rubbed his hands gleefully. That suits our plans exactly, he said. There is nothing to prevent our hearing what Raoul has to say to this person who has come from Paris at 10 o'clock at night, to see him. Let us go in. Prosper seemed averse to this, and said, It is a serious thing for us to do, monsieur. Bless my soul! What else did we come here for? Did you think it was a pleasure trip, merely to enjoy this lovely weather? He said in a bantering tone. But we might be discovered. Suppose we are? If the least noise betrays our presence, you have only to advance boldly as a friend come to visit a friend, and, finding the door open, walked in. But unfortunately the heavy oak door was locked. M. Vergeret shook it in vain. How foolish, he said with vexation, I ought to have brought my instruments with me. A common lock which could be opened with a nail, and I have not even a piece of wire. Thinking it useless to attempt the door, he tried successively every window on the ground floor. Alas! Each blind was securely fastened on the inside. M. Vergeret was provoked. He prowled around the house like a fox around a hen-coop, seeking an entrance, but finding none. Despairingly he came back to the spot in front of the house, whence he had the best view of the lighted window. If I could only look in, he cried. Just to think that in there, and he pointed to the window, is the solution of the mystery, and we are cut off from it by 30 or 40 feet of cursed blank wall. Prosper was more surprised than ever at his companion's strange behavior. He seemed perfectly at home in this garden. He ran about without any precaution, so that one would have supposed him accustomed to such expeditions, especially when he spoke of picking the lock of an occupied house, as if he were talking of opening a snuff-box. He was utterly indifferent to the rain and sleet driven in his face by the gusts of wind as he splashed about in the mud trying to find some way of entrance. I must get a peep into that window, he said, and I will, cost what it may. Prosper seemed to suddenly remember something. There is a ladder here, he cried. Why did you not tell me that before? Where is it? At the end of the garden, under the trees. They ran to the spot, and in a few minutes had the ladder standing against the wall. But to their chagrin they found the ladder 6 feet too short. 6 long feet of wall between the top of the ladder and the lighted window was a very discouraging sight to Prosper, he exclaimed. We cannot reach it. We can reach it, cried M. Vergeret triumphantly. And he quickly placed himself a yard off from the house, and, seizing the ladder, cautiously raised it and rested the bottom round on his shoulders, at the same time holding the 2 uprights firmly and steadily with his hands. The obstacle was overcome. Now mount, he said to his companion. Prosper did not hesitate. The enthusiasm of difficulties so skillfully conquered, and the hope of triumph, gave him a strength and agility which he had never imagined he possessed. He made a sudden spring, and, seizing the lower rounds, quickly climbed up the ladder, which swayed and trembled beneath his weight. But he had scarcely looked in the lighted window when he uttered a cry which was drowned in the roaring tempest, and dropped like a log down on the wet grass, exclaiming, "The villain! The villain!" With wonderful promptness and vigor M. Verduret laid the ladder on the ground, and ran toward Prosper, fearing that he was dead or dangerously injured. "What did you see? Are you hurt?" he whispered. But Prosper had already risen. Although he had had a violent fall, he was unhurt. He was in a state when mind governs matter so absolutely that the body is insensible to pain. "I saw," he answered in a hoarse voice, "I saw Madeleine, do you understand, Madeleine, in that room, alone with Raoul." M. Verduret was confounded. Was it possible that he, the infallible expert, had been mistaken in his deductions? He well knew that M. de Lager's visitor was a woman, but his own conjectures, and the note which Madame Gypsy had sent to him at the tavern, had fully assured him that this woman was Madame Fauvel. "You must be mistaken," he said to Prosper. "No, monsieur, no. Never could I mistake another for Madeleine." "Ah! You who heard what she said to me yesterday, answer me, was I to expect such infamous treason as this? You said to me then, 'She loves you, she loves you.' Now do you think she loves me? Speak." M. Verduret did not answer. He had first been stupefied by his mistake, and was now racking his brain to discover the cause of it, which was soon discerned by his penetrating mind. "This is the secret discovered by Nina," continued Prosper. "Madeleine, this pure and noble Madeleine, whom I believe to be as immaculate as an angel, is in love with this thief, who has even stolen the name he bears, and I, trusting fool that I was, made this scoundrel my best friend. I confided to him all my hopes and fears, and he was her lover. Of course they amused themselves by ridiculing my silly devotion and blind confidence." He stopped, overcome by his violent emotions. Wounded vanity is the worst of miseries. The certainty of having been so shamefully deceived and betrayed made Prosper almost insane with rage. "This is the last humiliation I shall submit to," he fiercely cried. "It shall not be said that I was coward enough to stand by and let an insult like this go unpunished." He started toward the house, but M. Verduret seized his arm and said, "What are you going to do?" "Have my revenge. I will break down the door. What do I care for the noise and scandal, now that I have nothing to lose? I shall not attempt to creep into the house like a thief, but as a master, as one who has a right to enter, as a man who, having received an insult which can only be washed out with blood, comes to demand satisfaction." "You will do nothing of the sort, Prosper." "Who will prevent me?" "I will." "You? Do not hope that you will be able to deter me. I will appear before them, put them to the blush, kill them both, then put an end to my own wretched existence. That is what I intend to do, and nothing shall stop me." If M. Verduret had not held Prosper with a vice-like grip, he would have escaped, and carried out his threat. "If you make any noise, Prosper, or raise an alarm, all your hopes are ruined." "I have no hopes now. Raoul, put on his guard, will escape us, and you will remain dishonored forever." "What difference is it to me?" "It makes a great difference to me. I have sworn to prove your innocence. A man of your age can easily find a wife, but can never restore luster to a tarnished name. Let nothing interfere with the establishing of your innocence. Genuine passion is uninfluenced by surrounding circumstances." M. Verduret and Prosper stood foot-deep in mud, wet to the skin, the rain pouring down on their heads, and yet seemed in no hurry to end their dispute. I will be avenged, repeated Prosper with the persistency of a fixed idea. I will avenge myself. Well, avenge yourself like a man, and not like a child, said M. Vergeret angrily. Monsieur. Yes, I repeat it, like a child. What will you do after you get into the house? Have you any arms? No. You rush upon Raoul, and a struggle ensues. While you two are fighting, Madeleine jumps in her carriage and drives off. What then? Which is the stronger, you or Raoul? Overcome by the sense of his powerlessness, Prosper was silent. And arms would be of no use, continued M. Vergeret. It is fortunate you have none with you, for it would be very foolish to shoot a man whom you can send to the galleys. What must I do? Wait. Vengeance is a delicious fruit, that must ripen in order that we may fully enjoy it. Prosper was unsettled in his resolution. M. Vergeret, seeing this, brought forth his last and strongest argument. How do we know, he said, that Emile Madeleine is here on her own account? Did we not come to the conclusion that she was sacrificing herself for the benefit of someone else? That superior will which compelled her to banish you may have constrained this step tonight. That which coincides with our secret wishes is always eagerly welcomed. This supposition, apparently improbable, struck Prosper as possibly true. That might be the case, he murmured, who knows? I would soon know, said M. Vergeret, if I could see them together in that room. Will you promise me, monsieur, to tell me the exact truth, all that you see and hear, no matter how painful it may be for me? I swear it, upon my word of honor. Then, with a strength of which a few minutes before he would not have believed himself possessed, Prosper raised the ladder, placed the last round on his shoulders, and said to M. Vergeret, Mount. M. Vergeret rapidly ascended the ladder without even shaking it, and had his head on a level with the window. Prosper had seen but too well. There was Madeleine at this hour of the night, alone with Raoul de Lagers in his room. M. Vergeret observed that she still wore her shawl and bonnet. She was standing in the middle of the room, talking with great animation. Her look and gestures betrayed indignant scorn. There was an expression of ill-disguised loathing upon her beautiful face. Raoul was seated by the fire, stirring up the coals with a pair of tongs. Every now and then, he would shrug his shoulders, like a man resigned to everything he heard, and had no answer, except, I cannot help it. I can do nothing for you. M. Verger would willingly have given the diamond ring on his finger to be able to hear what was said, but the roaring wind completely drowned their voices. They are evidently quarreling, he thought, but it is not a lover's quarrel. Madeleine continued talking, and it was by closely watching the face of Lagers, clearly revealed by the lamp on the mantel, that M. Vergeret hoped to discover the meaning of the scene before him. At one moment Lagers would start and tremble in spite of his apparent indifference, the next, he would strike at the fire with the tongs, as if giving vent to his rage at some reproach uttered by Madeleine. Finally Madeleine changed her threats into entreaties, and, clasping her hands, almost fell at his knees. He turned away his head, and refused to answer save in monosyllables. Several times she turned to leave the room, but each time returned, as if asking a favor, and unable to make up her mind to leave the house till she had obtained it. At last she seemed to have uttered something decisive, for Raoul quickly rose and opened a desk near the fireplace, from which he took a bundle of papers, and handed them to her. Well, thought M. Vergeret, this looks bad. Can it be a compromising correspondence which the fair one wants to secure? Madeleine took the papers, but was apparently still dissatisfied. She again entreated him to give her something else. Raoul refused, and then she threw the papers on the table. The papers seemed to puzzle M. Vergeret very much, as he gazed at them through the window. "I am not blind," he said, "and I certainly am not mistaken. Those papers, red, green, and yellow, are pawnbrokers' tickets." Madeleine turned over the papers as if looking for some particular ones. She selected 3, which she put in her pocket, disdainfully pushing the others aside. She was evidently preparing to take her departure, for she said a few words to Raoul, who took up the lamp as if to escort her downstairs. There was nothing more for M. Vergeret to see. He carefully descended the ladder, muttering to himself, "Pawnbrokers' tickets! What infamous mystery lies at the bottom of all this?" The first thing he did was to remove the ladder. Raoul might take it into his head to look around the garden, when he came to the door with Madeleine, and if he did so the ladder could scarcely fail to attract his attention. M. Vergeret and Prosper hastily laid it on the ground, regardless of the shrubs and vines they destroyed in doing so, and then concealed themselves among the trees, whence they could watch at once the front door and the outer gate. Madeleine and Raoul appeared in the doorway. Raoul set the lamp on the bottom step, and offered his hand to the girl, but she refused it with haughty contempt, which somewhat soothed Prosper's lacerated heart. This scornful behavior did not, however, seem to surprise or hurt Raoul. He simply answered by an ironical gesture which implied, "As you please." He followed her to the gate, which he opened and closed after her, then he hurried back to the house, while Madeleine's carriage drove rapidly away. "Now, monsieur," said Prosper, "you must tell me what you saw. You promised me the truth no matter how bitter it might be. Speak, I can bear it, be it what it may." "You will only have joy to bear, my friend. Within a month you will bitterly regret your suspicions of tonight. You will blush to think that you ever imagined Emile Madeleine to be intimate with a man like Lagers. But, monsieur, appearances. It is precisely against appearances that we must be on our guard. Always distrust them. A suspicion, false or just, is always based on something. But we must not stay here forever, and, as Raoul has fastened the gate, we shall have to climb back again. But there is the ladder. Let it stay where it is, as we cannot efface our footprints. He will think thieves have been trying to get into the house." They scaled the wall, and had not walked 50 steps when they heard the noise of a gate being unlocked. They stood aside and waited. A man soon passed on his way to the station. "That is Raoul," said M. Vergeret, "and Joseph will report to us that he has gone to tell Clamaran what has just taken place. If they are only kind enough to speak French." He walked along quietly for some time, trying to connect the broken chain of his deductions. "How in the deuce," he abruptly asked, "did this Lagers, who is devoted to gay society, come to choose a lonely country house to live in?" "I suppose it was because Emma Fauvel's villa is only 15 minutes' ride from here, on the Seine. That accounts for his staying here in the summer, but in winter?" "Oh, in winter he has a room at the Hotel du Louvre, and all the year round keeps an apartment in Paris." This did not enlighten M. Vergeret much. He hurried his pace. "I hope our driver has not gone. We cannot take the train which is about to start, because Raoul would see us at the station." Although it was more than an hour since M. Vergeret and Prosper left the hack at the branch road, they found it waiting for them in front of the tavern. The driver could not resist the desire to change his 5-franc piece. He had ordered dinner, and, finding his wine very good, was calling for more, when he looked up and saw his employers. "Well, you are in a strange state," he exclaimed. Prosper replied that they had gone to see a friend, and, losing their way, had fallen into a pit, as if there were pits in Vezinit forest. "Ah, that is the way you got covered with mud, is it?" exclaimed the driver, who, though apparently contented with this explanation, strongly suspected that his two customers had been engaged in some nefarious transaction. This opinion seemed to be entertained by everyone present, for they looked at Prosper's muddy clothes and then at each other in a knowing way. But M. Vergeret stopped all comment by saying, "Come on. All right, monsieur, get in while I settle my bill, I will be there in a minute." The drive back was silent and seemed interminably long. Prosper at first tried to draw his strange companion into conversation, but, as he received nothing but monosyllables in reply, held his peace for the rest of the journey. He was again beginning to feel irritated at the absolute empire exercised over him by this man. Physical discomfort was added to his other troubles. He was stiff and numb, every bone in him ached with the cold. Although mental endurance may be unlimited, bodily strength must in the end give way. A violent effort is always followed by reaction. Lying back in a corner of the carriage, with his feet upon the front seat, M. Vergeret seemed to be enjoying a nap, yet he was never more wide awake. He was in a perplexed state of mind. This expedition, which, he had been confident, would resolve all his doubts, had only added mystery to mystery. His chain of evidence, which he thought so strongly linked, was completely broken. For him the facts remained the same, but circumstances had changed. He could not imagine what common motive, what moral or material complicity, what influences, could have existed to make the four actors in his drama, Madame Favel, Madeline, Raoul, and Clamarin, seem to have the same object in view. He was seeking in his fertile mind, that encyclopedia of craft and subtlety, for some combination which would throw light on the problem before him. The midnight bells were ringing when they reached the Archangel, and for the first time M. Vergeret remembered that he had not dined. Fortunately Madame Alexander was still up, and in the twinkling of an eye had improvised a tempting supper. It was more than attention, more than respect, that she showed her guest. Prosper observed that she gazed admiringly at M. Vergeret all the while he was eating his supper. "You will not see me tomorrow," said M. Vergeret to Prosper, when he had risen to leave the room, "but I will be here about this time tomorrow night. Perhaps I shall discover what I am seeking at M. Jandidir's ball." Prosper was dumb with astonishment. What? Would M. Vergeret think of appearing at a ball given by the wealthiest and most fashionable bankers in Paris? This accounted for his sending to the costumer. "Then you are invited to this ball?" The expressive eyes of M. Vergeret danced with amusement. "Not yet," he said, "but I shall be." Oh, the inconsistency of the human mind! Prosper was tormented by the most serious preoccupations. He looked sadly around his chamber, and, as he thought of M. Vergeret's projected pleasure at the ball, exclaimed, "Ah, how fortunate he is! Tomorrow he will have the privilege of seeing Madeline."